I write about the correlating career, which is a term I love to use about how almost all artists have to have a correlating career, and I really don't like people to call it plan B, fallback, backup plan. Like, just embrace it. We do this too.
It's not like Flashdance where she gets into Juilliard or whatever and then the movie ends. I mean, you have to basically like win The Voice 6 times in a row to get to a career.
I was scanning my email a few weeks ago, and this article popped up titled An Impossible Choice, Music Majors COVID-19 and an Uncertain Future. And it had gotten something like 20,000 reads already. And I just had to reach out to the co-authors of this article and talk to them about this dilemma, which is totally fascinating to me. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we were talking with Zach Finkelstein and Dana Lynne Varga. And I love how small the bass world is. Dana is actually the daughter of bass luthier Arnold Schnitzer, who I've had on the podcast. What a small world it really is. But I had such a great time talking with them about this. I call it a dangerous topic. It's something that I think is important to explore, particularly somebody like me who's not in the world of academia. Academia. I never know how to pronounce that word. So we dig into this topic, the unique challenges that vocalists face in their career, and both Zach and Dana are vocalists, the concept of a correlating career, which Dana brings up and I think is super interesting, the pitfalls of young artist programs that singers go through, and much more. Definitely check out the article. We've got that linked up, and check out both the Middleclass Artist. That is the site that Zach started and that many people, including Dana, contribute to. And definitely check out Dana's site, The Empowered Musician. We've got all that linked up in the show notes. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Trumpet Labs, Practisma, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's get into this conversation with Zach and Dana. That article I opened up, I don't remember how the heck I saw it, if Drew McManus had a Dapsistration link to it or something, but it was one of those where I was like, and I rarely do this, I was like, I must find their contact info and talk with them immediately, because these are like all the topics that I love to dig into. So thank you for taking the time and for doing that and everything else. What a cool site you've built. It's like 2 years or so you've been putting out content there?
Yeah, I've been working on Middleclass Artist for a couple years, and I know that Dana just relaunched Empowered Musician as well. And yeah, we've all been kind of working towards this goal of bringing truth to what's going on in the classical music industry.
Yeah, it's particularly struck a chord with me because if we rewind 15 years, I was doing a lot of writing on the topic. I actually put out a series of blog posts that led to a book called Road Warrior Without an Expense Account. Kind of like carping about all the things I was seeing in my career as a freelance bass player, and you know, I've always been interested in the topic, and it's just so I put out something. I'll try to dig it up and send it to you. I think you two would dig it. It was called a Driving for Dollars calculator. And actually, Drew McManus and I wrote a post, and Drew got inspired to actually create an app so you could plug in all the dollars and see if you were losing money. Oh, wow. Which is a very real consideration that I know you've covered. So
yeah.
Now, how did you two get to know each other?
Well, so we sort of are. We have a lot of similar ideas, and we present them to the world slightly differently. And so we decided that we should collaborate a bit because we have common goals. And Zach is of Middleclass Artist. I'm of Empowered Musician. And so the collab was sort of to draw attention to both of our missions and sites, and also join forces in sort of exposing some more of this stuff. And we'll probably do it again.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing more of that. I mean, I don't know what the metric of going viral is in our world, but I would say that article certainly did. I'm guessing from your perspective as well.
I think so. I mean, it was a solid base hit.
I think we're at like over 20K, so it's pretty good.
What's the reaction been to it? Because it's just so you're so fair-minded in the way you present the data, and you do present some positives too. But obviously, it's like this impossible situation. And I've talked to some, like the title suggests, and I've talked to some people that I was talking to a young woman who just finished her freshman year, and we were chatting, and said, are you going back in the fall? She's like, heck no, I'm going to go like train to be a massage therapist for a year, and we'll see what happens. We'll regroup. And it's such a scary topic is the other thing, because so many people that I know are involved in academia somehow. So I think it's something that we need to talk about, and you did so well, but so many people are terrified because it's like a house of cards, and all these people are employed and going through, and it's just this system that we know, and all three of us have been through in some capacity. So yeah, I guess the question, which I asked like 5 minutes ago, is what's the reaction been like? What have people been saying?
On my end, it's been positive. I'm always surprised when no one attacks my data. I mean, I brought it in from the Musical America website. It's pretty clear. I mean, a degree costs a whole heck of a lot of money. And it's, for a lot of people, it may not have that value. And I think, part of the criticism, I think, was we're all so connected, as you said, to academia. A lot of my friends are, adjunct professors at these small colleges that may not have the resources of like a Yale or some of the ones mentioned in the article. And I really feel for them too. They're sort of caught between the rock and the hard place. So yeah, I would say the only pushback has maybe been from, some people are like, well, what about these people who are just kind of on the marginal edges? And, again, it's, I want them to have students. It's not that I don't want those people to have jobs too.
Yeah, it's such a tricky thing, and I've had a whole bunch of like not in public conversations with friends and colleagues in academia, and it just seems like it's such a fraught time in about every way imaginable, but just that in particular. And it's just one of those things like a friend of mine named Andrew Hitz has a podcast called The Entrepreneurial Musician and does some other things, and he likes to talk about how when you take two of the most conservative institutions, classical music and academia, and meld them together, you get this just very slow moving thing. I went to Northwestern University. If you look at the double bass curriculum from 1950 and 2018, probably fairly similar, and if you look at anything else, so like what's the point of training in this way, which you get into, so I think it's just a good thing, and so I applaud both of you for kind of
Thanks.
Challenging and questioning.
And I've been speaking out about some issues with academia for a while. And I was originally sort of on the track to be in academia. I got my doctorate and I love to teach very much. And I do have an adjunct position with the Laundry School of Music of Bard College, which is a program that very much aligns with my values. And I feel is like the future of what academia is going to need to be if we're going to do this. But, my big focus when I talk about academia is gender disparity. Particularly in voice programs, which is something that I've written on many times. And that's one of many, many, many issues that we find in the academy. But, it'll probably come up again as we talk about young artist programs and as we delve into, some of the issues that young singers face today. But really, what you need to know is that in most programs, you're dealing with about 75% female voice majors and 25% male. And then the performance opportunities don't reflect that. And then essentially what you run into a lot of times, not all the time, is that male scholarship is being paid for by female singers. That's been a little passion project of mine, is talking about that particular angle.
Well, it's so interesting to me as someone with an instrumental background, and I've subbed at the Lyric Opera in Chicago, and I've played my fair share of opera and other vocal performances, and that it really got me thinking about just how different it is when you're being paid a larger sum of money much less frequently throughout a given season, versus like the type of work I typically do, anywhere between $200 and $400 or something a gig, maybe a few $1,000s for a week with the San Francisco Symphony. It's just a really different model. And then, of course, your instrument being yourself, if anything happens, or with these force majeure that's been happening, it's just the vocalists seem like they're in such a particularly risky category compared maybe to what my world is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's big risk, big great rewards. The people at the top of the opera business are making, maybe 10, maybe 12, maybe $14,000 a performance. But their contracts are very long. They require an inordinate amount of preparation. It's not something you can sight read. They're off book from day one, and artists bear all those costs up front. So you require coaching on your own, taking lessons on your own, getting the piece in your voice, which could actually take years. So you only see 2 months on the calendar, but that is maybe a decade-long process. And it was complicated this year. You mentioned force majeure, where the timing of it back in March also coincided with a lot of people's, full-on payments. Not everyone is up to date on their taxes. So, I think I wrote a piece back in March describing this very successful European singer who, owed a lot of money in back quarterlies, who's had a very expensive lifestyle by necessity. I mean, you're expected to have a publicist at, $2,000 a month, places in New York and in wherever you are in Europe. And, if you have a child, obviously those costs as well. And then, with force majeure, which is the clause that essentially eliminated artists in America for a year, which is, that in case of pandemic, both sides can, or, flood or whatever, both sides can kind of walk away, except, a singer can't declare force majeure. It's sort of it's up to the house. So with these small contracts, it was even losing the spring and the summer was devastating to a lot of singers, especially as a percentage, those singers at the top who only have 2 or 3 big contracts a year.
It'd be great because a lot of people, obviously have a lot of bass players that listen to this podcast, but it's been around long enough that a lot of people outside of bass listen as well. But I would guess the percentage of people who have had the sort of experience you have, like professional vocal training, is kind of low. Can you just talk me through, either of you or both of you, through like what it's like, let's say a standard path, like undergrad and then with the young artist apprentice programs, which I remember playing at Lyric with some of those concerts, and I even did the Des Moines Metro Opera for a few years, which I believe has one as well. Can you just take us through that path?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to say, because this is my whole thing, that, I call it the pipeline. That's how I refer to it. It's a terminology that I use in the Empowered Musician and in my Facebook group, which is the Empowered Singers group. And it's still persistently prescribed by the Academy as the way to do it. And so, and I have feelings about that. But here it is. So you usually study singing for undergraduate school, whether it's conservatory or not, and then you go to graduate school for vocal performance right after, like immediately following undergrad. Occasionally people take a gap year. It's rare. It's becoming less rare. And then post-grad and also during grad school, you are supposed to be auditioning for these young artist programs, apprenticeship programs that are summer programs, and in some cases year-long programs that may or may not have a renewable second-year contract, which is sort of the closest thing you see to a FEST contract in the States, these apprenticeship programs. And I'm sure Zach wants to talk about what they pay, so I'll leave that to him. Although I've written extensively on that as well, because it's really scary. And then, during that path, you also are doing competitions. And so you're supposed to be, 22 to 27 while the big stuff is happening, ideally in an ideal world. And you're doing all these competitions and you're getting exposure in front of agents and managers. And then it's a vicious cycle, too, because if you don't get a sort of higher level young artist program on your resume early on, then it's harder to get to the next one and the next one. So you end up in this like sort of death spiral if you have trouble at the entry level. And I like to say that my anecdotal evidence as a career coach and someone who studies this stuff is that the pipeline as it stands is successful for about 1 or 2% of people who graduate from vocal performance programs from grad school. So after you have all this exposure and you meet your agent and you do your apprenticeship programs, then voila, you have your full-time operatic career is the goal, right? You're making a living full time, which is a thing that gets thrown around so much. Like if you aren't a full-time opera singer, you've failed somehow. So that's the pipeline to answer your question in our world.
I am so proud to have my course with Discover Double Bass Beginner's Classical Bass out in the world. This was a long time coming, friends, and this course is designed, as the name implies, for beginner bassists who want to learn how to play classical music, or for more experienced players who wish to revisit the foundations of technique. The course is comprised of 66 lessons over 4 hours and covers a wide range of topics on classical bass, which will make a real difference to you playing. It is the perfect course for beginners. I feel weird saying that since it's my course, but I definitely believe in it, to build a solid foundation of double bass technique and to help you feel confident playing. Many of the lessons include transcriptions of the pieces, exercises, and etudes, so you have everything you need to practice at home. I spent hundreds of hours putting this together over the last few years. I'm so glad to see it out in the world. We have a link to it in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble-bass.com/Jason Heath. This episode is brought to you by Trumpet Labs. They make hand-built mics out of Portland, Oregon, and they have an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. The Nadine is a condenser mic with a clear, natural sound and incredible feedback rejection. This mic is a completely new design. The head mounts in between the strings above the tailpiece with a rubber grommet, and the body securely straps to the tailpiece with velcro elastic. A 14-inch Mogami cable connects the two parts, making it easy to place on any bass. It's durable and holds up to the demanding needs of the instrument while offering excellent sound quality. Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt just for Contrabass Conversations listeners with the purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out the Nadine. It's a very similar pipeline to what I've experienced if we're thinking about instrumentalists hoping to get a job in the Boston Symphony or Chicago Symphony or that sort of thing. And I don't know what the percentage is. I love hearing that percentage that you've estimated, but I definitely in the low single digits. I think people in the pipeline I've experienced, end up in LA Phil or a job like that.
Yeah, I mean, it fluctuates.
As an example, so like one mid-level young artist program, these are the numbers for that. This is one that pays artists $125 a week as of 2018. Over 1,000 applicants, I think, for 24 spots. So less than a 4% acceptance rate. More difficult to get into than Harvard on an average percentage rate. And, that's not the end. It's not like Flashdance where she gets into Juilliard or whatever, and then the movie ends. I mean, you have to basically win The Voice 6 times in a row to get to a career, because, you have to get into the top masters. You have to get into the top young artist programs. That has to lead to an agent or some kind of major opportunity. And that, eventually leads to bigger houses. But there are definitely many, many ways to be a classical singer. I mean, Dana mentioned it. I never went through the kind of YAP pipeline. I did a lot of summer festivals like Tanglewood, Banff, the Britton Piers Young Artists program in Alborough. And I did some main stage work at I think probably a level 2 house like New York City Opera and Grand Rapids Opera. But most of the bulk of my work is symphonic and new music and early music. So, and, I just reach out to conductors and they say, here's my CD here. I've worked with everyone you've ever worked with. Do you want to hire me? And they say yes or no, or they ignore me, and then I move on.
Yeah. I've also over the years leaned myself more towards concert and symphonic work as well. So Zach and I have that in common.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, many, many ways to do it. And the problem with the young artist pipeline is I think it overvalues a master's in music and like 3 or 4, $0 an hour internships for a couple of years when, you're heavily in debt and you really need those years to fight back the tides of interest and make a living. So.
Yeah, and the debt thing, and which I love the numbers that you put out. When all of these degrees, the best case scenario, you're spending almost $100,000, right, for an undergrad. Many cases, much more than that, and just the pressure that puts on you to succeed at all costs. It's like the opposite of what you want as an artist, to be able to take a chance and explore and chase an opportunity. And something that I've thought about so much, I'm guessing might be similar in traditional vocal training is, I look at most of the professors where I went to school, Northwestern, or name your given institution. Most of them don't have experience building the kind of careers you're talking about, which would be like what a lot of people that listen to this podcast do. Little freelance work, maybe sub in an orchestra, play a jazz gig, do a little composing,
it's
teaching.
It's a portfolio career. That's what it is. It's a portfolio career or a mosaic career, whatever.
Right, but I'm guessing that most of the professors, certainly probably almost all at those institutions that you are Curtis and the like, something like that level, they probably don't have a lot of experience building a portfolio career. So I'm right.
And that contributes to another vicious cycle of a path being prescribed that is, successful for very few people. And there are also other ways to become opera singers, and at a high level, and it might not be full time, but there are also plenty of other ways to get there other than directly through this pipeline. But yes, you're right. A lot of people at the highest level of influence were in a position of privilege, which doesn't mean that, many people who are of influence haven't struggled and haven't worked hard and haven't put their dues in. That's very much true. But the portfolio career, and another thing I write about a lot, I don't know if you have read any of this yet, Jason, I write about the correlating career, which is a term I love to use about how almost all artists have to have a correlating career. And I really don't like people to call it plan B, fallback, backup plan. Like, just embrace it. We do this too. And hopefully it's something you love.
Yeah, no, I look forward to reading about that on your site. But can you go into that a little bit more? I like that word, the correlating.
Thank
career.
you.
Yeah.
My feelings on correlating careers are one of the sort of big reasons that I started The Empowered Musician and became a career coach, because when people don't succeed in the pipeline, which most people don't, or at least not in the exactly prescribed way, they feel like failures, and they carry around all this shame, and they carry around all this debt. By the way, the worst debt I've encountered in a career coaching from a young soprano, 25 years old, fresh out of master's, was $227K. So just let that sink in for a second. And almost all artists at some point or forever will need to have a correlating career. And I use the term correlating for the reasons I stated earlier. But why do we need to be ashamed of that? A correlating career is in many cases part of a portfolio career, right? So for some people, a correlating career is in music, and for some people it's not. Right? For me, I'm a voice teacher and a career coach and a writer and a singer, but other people might be a massage therapist and a cellist. Well, that's probably a bad idea. A massage therapist and a singer. Or they might be, they might code, or they might work in tech, or they might have a full-time arts admin job and still be performing regularly. And so, a correlating career is usually necessary unless you're independently wealthy, and then good for you. And I say, A, let's plan for it. B, let's find something we don't hate, because we're probably going to need it long term. C, let's make sure it's lucrative. And D, let's get rid of the shame.
Yeah,
totally.
100%. I love it. It's very well stated.
I'll jump in because Dana and I mean, that's why I started Middleclass Artist, was to talk about, it's not even a dirty secret. It's just life. It's like, can you believe that someone has a job when no one is paying you anything? Like, oh my God. And I call myself a full-time soloist, and I've been doing that for almost a decade. And on my resume, it very much appears to be full time. Like I perform, 25, 30, besides 2020, of course, but, I generally perform like 25 to 30 times a year, 3 months a year on the road. And I get to say no to things that I don't want to do because I have another career in data analytics. And I've cultivated that career, like Dana said. So in fact, it's allowed me more opportunities. It's allowed me to, I just put out my second album, and it's allowed me to, just do that. It allows you to
stay in the game. It allows you to stay in the game because you can afford to.
Exactly. You basically, you have to have, and it's one of the actual dirty secrets of opera is there are so many barriers of entry that cost money, that prevent, BIPOC and women from cultivating a full career, in part because women bear such a larger portion of cost than men in conservatory. But, there are so many barriers to entry. So if you think about, going back to the pipeline, what Dana was talking about, an undergrad and a master's in music and 3 years of young artist experience is sort of like, that's about table stakes to be an opera singer in America. And that is 9 years. And you are not being paid anything during those years almost. There's only a handful of exceptions, like, Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Met. And a very large chunk of those companies don't pay a living wage. And you just have to figure that out. So the people who have another thing are going to, I don't want to use the term win out because it's not a competition. At least I don't feel it as a competition with my colleagues. But, it's sort of an attrition situation where whoever can get to a decade in sort of has a career and whoever can't doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know if you two are familiar with Jason Haheim, but I'll share it briefly, and I'll send you a link. You'd really find his path interesting, and this could be a good segue point too. So Jason Haheim is the principal timpanist for the Met, but he did not go to music school. He trained as a scientist and worked at a nanotech firm in Chicago for a decade, and he said, you know what? I've got my house, I've got my timpani, I can practice, I live close to my job, and I'm just going to get better. And he said, I can outlast them. That's what I have here, which is sort of what you're saying, Zach, resonates with me. It makes me think of that. And you know what? He did. And so we had an interesting conversation. I haven't put it on the podcast right now. Again, he's not in academia. I'm not. I feel like it's good to do, it's like, all right, Jason Haheim, you've made it to the pinnacle of your career with zero music school. Do we need music school? And in your shared article, The Impossible Choice, you have a typical vocal undergrad, I believe, laid out, the curriculum. And I did a similar project a few years ago where I went through my Northwestern transcript and I looked at everything on that transcript. And I was a music performance major. And then I thought about everything I'd done in my life, which includes music performance, but several other things. And I thought, like, what did I learn from that degree that I'm using in life? And then I also thought, how much should I pay for it? It seemed expensive at the time. Now it seems cheap compared to what we're talking about. But like, what? Do you have any thoughts on? I mean, I guess I'm talking about like what's the value of music school? Is this something we should be directing people toward? Maybe right here in 2020, or in general, or just I know it's a dangerous topic, but probably the three of us can talk about it relatively.
Zach and
unscathed.
I are always here for dangerous topics. Always here for it.
All right.
Always. I can definitely speak to that. I think there's an immense value to music school to become a professional musician. And I think there are some skills you learn in a music program that are applicable to other careers. However, if you're going to do another career and you know that you have to do something else as well, it makes sense to keep your options open. And I'm definitely not saying as a backup plan, like as Dana said, correlating situation. So when you're in that degree, most people have to be earning money, right? Or they have to be in an internship or do something over the summer. So, if you do go to music school, instead of paying $8,000 to go to Italy because your teacher asked you to sing the third version of Marcellina or something, maybe find a job in your city at subjects you care about, and do some really just dog-eared entry-level work, and you're stuck in Excel and you probably hate it a little, but you'll at least get some experience in that. And then, part of the problem is you get like 8 years in and then you hit a wall and people just shut down because there's no other option. So, I am in an insane level of privilege starting in March because I lost 11 contracts and I lost almost an entire year of work. And it did not affect my financial situation because I have another career, because my wife has a career. I mean, we pay childcare, but, we have a lot of costs. But, because for the last 9 years, I've been doing something else as well, full time. It allowed me to take a step back, say, okay, everything's changed. This whole situation's changed. What can I do? So what I can do is sort of, I mean, there's no room for a Messiah soloist right now. Like, my career was singing with mid-level symphonies, and they would fly me in, and they would put me up in a hotel. Nope. And then they would pay me to sing for 12 minutes. That's just not going to happen. Like, the 2 symphonies that hired me for Messiahs were one of the first to furlough, like, their entire staff of musicians. So I can't feasibly do any business development and reach out to these organizations. So what I can do is I can release my own music and talk about the business. And that's kind of what I did while I'm working and caring for a 15-month-year-old. And, it gave me room to shift gears. And I'm very lucky for that. And it's just another way to do that.
I'll chime in regarding the value of music school. I mean, I really think it's dependent on the person. I have never career coached musicians as much as I have this summer, because widespread panic. And I'm known as correlating career lady. And so everyone's like, help me. And every person I meet in every circumstance is different. And some people are really entrepreneurial, others are not. Some people need the structure of music school. Some people are deficient, singers especially, are deficient in oral skills and music theory and literally can't learn music unless they go to music school, which is not really true. There's plenty of other ways they could do it. But again, that comes down to, like, how self-motivated are you? Are you someone who can create your own adventure outside of the school setting? Some people can, some people can't. Some people can afford or have undergrad paid for them and can use that as their foundation and or double major, and then choose their own adventure post undergrad. But the idea that you need a master's to be a classical singer is just false. It's false.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I made a career shift about 2008. I just realized that my wife we were both music performance majors. She was a harp performance, ended up going to medical school, and I realized the Heath household needed some sort of stable income. So I went back and got a teaching degree and taught high school orchestra for 7 years. And I felt like I was giving up. And actually, that's why I started writing, because I thought, I'm leaving this business. I'm going to go do something else. The pressure's off. I can write about the irony, of course, is by writing honestly about the business, I ended up getting better work. I started and elevated. I got hired at it also, by taking that financial pressure off, all of a sudden the ratio of gigs I was playing that I wanted to play went way up. All of a sudden I wasn't like driving, in a 500-mile radius to play like every single community orchestra gig I could. And I ended up having way more satisfaction as an artist by kind of opening up the blinders a little bit. And these days it's like the epitome of a portfolio career. Like, I work in the industry, I do this podcast, I have online courses, I play with the San Francisco Symphony, if that ever exists again, and so but I think it's really interesting, and it's so so what would you, if Zach and Dana, if you could wave a magic wand and you could create the ideal like music program or blended program or something, and any thoughts if you could if you could change the world in that regard, any thoughts on what you might change?
I have a lot of thoughts, but Dana can go.
It's a hard question.
It's an impossible question. I know.
It's an impossible question, but I mean, number one, stop reducing. We need to reduce the shame and stigma around the fact that we will have to do other work. And we should choose carefully what that work is. Just like side note, another reason I'm passionate about correlating careers is because as a voice teacher, I'm passionate about vocal health. And so you can't just be bartending or waiting tables or doing reception work forever, because you also need to sing and practice. So like, there are correlating careers that work better than others financially, vocally, and for satisfaction. So sidebar, but so one, that the idea of a portfolio career and correlating careers sort of being part of the education, right? So as an example, as I mentioned, I teach at Laundry School of Music of Bard College in Cambridge, and we we're one of the only programs that has a career coaching curriculum as part of the required curriculum. You are coached towards your goals. We need to see more of that. We need to see more than like a 1 semester entrepreneurship requirement that nobody cares about. We need more pragmatism in the whole field. And I'm always like, Debbie Downer, pragmatic Dana, like I'm the opposite of like the starry-eyed, like I'm going to sing at the Met. I'm 18. I like opera, but I think entrepreneurship, business of singing, portfolio career, and an understanding of debt and accrued interest and that kind of counseling is imperative, as well as just much more, far more multifaceted education. Like singers, I'm amazed when I meet time after time after time singers who have just worked on opera arias. They don't have an oratorio package. They have very little art song. They're like, oh, I did a recital. I'm like, yeah, you did your one required recital. They don't know anything about the art song rep. They have never commissioned a piece. They've, so they don't have very much chamber music experience. We need to be also encompassing more multifaceted careers and multifaceted singing within the genre is my feeling. How that comes to pass. Also, last thing, and then I'll turn it over to Zach. We accept too many people. There's too many people accepted into the schools. There's too many voice programs. There's too many voice majors in the voice programs. And then we end up with a saturation issue. And we also end up with people who will pay anything for those degrees. And there's too many people. There should be far more scholarship and fewer students. That's my feeling.
I mean, yeah, I agree with everything Dana said. If I were to put a hacksaw to the Bachelor of Music and Vocal Arts, I would do a lot. I'd first think of what skills professionals use in the workplace and work back from there. So obviously everything involving, oral skills, keyboard skills, languages, that's all vital information. And, even doubling down on that would be great. We need to this is a totally different conversation, but we obviously need to redesign our music theory and music history curriculum to incorporate a more diverse group of perspectives, a less white Eurocentric perspective. And that is going to help students because moving forward, they're just going to be doing a lot more of that. I mean, all the interesting, exciting work is in contemporary music. And a lot of interesting voices are in that field. And if you want to really work with those people, you have to have some experience in, contemporary music, different perspectives. And so I think that's going to be important moving forward. From the business standpoint, you have to be emotionally intelligent to be a singer. You have to communicate verbally and in writing. You have to know how to work a room. You have to talk to people. So, a much greater emphasis on oral and written communication, whether that's English classes, whether that's a writing seminar, something like that. And the same thing, you need to know how to balance a budget. You need to know how to, look at a program and, say, I don't have a great chance of getting in here, but I'm going to give it a shot. But I'm not going to only apply to this thing because I understand what 1 in 1,000 means. So having an understanding of numeracy, of statistics, I think would be of great help too. And that also you could throw into business classes. I mean, it would be a really busy program, but if that was what a music program looked like, I probably would have gotten a Bachelor of Music.
I mean, even just the basics, like the basics of taxes. I cannot tell you how many people I meet who literally do not understand accrued interest. Like they do not understand that the loans that they take out that is not the amount of money that they will pay back. There's just so little literacy about money in the arts. So yeah.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, Dana, that correlating career is such a beautiful thing to think about, because I think when people think portfolio career, they're thinking within music. At least the folks I tend to interact with in music. But it's a big world out there. Music is a small slice, and often not the most highly compensated thing you could be doing with your time. You might find, I know a bassist who specializes in contemporary music, and he's a coder, and he does just the music he wants to do, plays that, has a great life, and
here
just
are a few of my favorite correlating careers from successful colleagues. Coding, which, by the way, you can take anywhere. Copy editing, massage therapy, acupuncture, life coaching. Somebody owns a coffee shop, realty, and there's another one that I love. I'm not going to remember it now, but just like a very brief example of the things that are open to us that are outside of music, because you're right. The concept of the portfolio or mosaic career is largely about music, and plenty of musicians do other things. But a correlating career can also be in music, can kind of go either way. And anyone who says that, if you don't do music full time, you're not a professional musician, I come at me. Any day of the week, I am here to argue with you.
Right. And we can think of so many examples throughout history. And in fact, most people had correlating career. The thought of this being a full-time thing is actually a very brief window in time. And certainly in my world of instrumental performance.
Jason, think about my dad. What does he do now?
Sure, exactly. Well, your dad's a great example, because wasn't he in corporate America before he went into woodworking? Am I remembering that right?
So my dad was a jazz bassist, and he did a little teaching. And as I mentioned, he had an ethical dilemma with teaching, which greatly influenced my feelings on the industry. He was at some point in car sales, and at some other point, I think, doing headhunting or whatever you call it now. And then he got into woodworking and started with guitars, and then apprenticed, and then, the rest is history, right?
My daily companion for practicing is the app Modacity. I love it so much, and the interface is so simple. You open it up, and you see a microphone and a timer. And here is Modacity founder Mark Gelfo on why you see that in the interface.
It comes down to practice efficiency. And practice efficiency, the way that I think about it, is an equation with three different variables. One of them is learning milestones, one of them is retention, and the other is time. I define practice efficiency as learning milestones times retention divided by time spent.
Modacity has helped my practicing so much, and so many other people I know. You can learn more at modacity.co and visit our site for a special offer on lifetime access to this app. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. Yeah, he's a great example of that kind of path. I wrote an article back well over a decade ago that called something like the disturbing ethics of adjunct teaching. I don't remember exactly what it was called. It was in the Adjunct Advocate, which has bit the dust, sadly. But it was it was occurring to me. I was at a smaller state institution, adjunct-based teacher, and I was occurring to me the disservice I was doing to these students by trying to recruit them to this program. If you had the aptitude, and I apologies if anyone from that program's listening, I love you all, but still, it's like, all right, if someone's got skills like I need X number of students to get paid, at this school. I am going to this high school student, and am I going to dishonestly try to recruit them to this school and recruit them into music when maybe they shouldn't be doing that, or certainly not at this institution? And then I started to think about all the hundreds and thousands of other people just like me that are doing that for this giant academia machine. And it just really, the whole music
giant academia machine, listen to
you. Well, my imagination. But it really troubled me, and I noticed it even at bigger institutions. Just the hunger for students. That just to feed the beast. When it might okay, now you spend $100 or whatever that student you said $220,000 or $230,000. All said and done through this program. I don't know. The line I've been saying recently when asked about it is music school is great, but at what cost? You know, it's one thing to go to your state school and get a great experience and take a whole bunch of different things. But we want to go study with those stars. We want to go do and so then, and there are so many great, this is maybe a different topic, but there are so many amazing, certainly in my world, probably on any instrument, teachers out there at some of these schools that really do have great programs. They're not Juilliard, but they're good. And you could have a great undergraduate experience. You could be doing anything with that. So I think it's...
I went to UMass Amherst, by the way, which was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah, I recommend Ithaca College over and over to people for bass. People think Ithaca College, but I say no. Wait, look, and so it's just a tricky thing. I would resist ever me personally saying like music school is bad. Don't go to music school. I don't think I'd say that, but I do think it's like the cost. You know, at what cost, and then what blinders are you going to have on that might not lead to a correlating career that you'd find incredible. It warms my heart when I talk to people who are saying I'm going into engineering and music performance or music performance minor or something like that.
Yeah, I feel for adjuncts very deeply because most of my friends are adjuncts. They do all the work, they get paid almost nothing, and they're the first ones out when there are budget cuts, which there will be. So I can't do a full blast maybe as much as y'all can, but I can say that, you know, from a statistical and economics perspective, which is, you know, largely my background, we look at cost and benefit analysis. And, you know, if the costs are going up and the benefits are going down, you may have to look at that decision. Like the value of a music education may not be what it once was for a number of reasons we've discussed. And what's more important is the current landscape is there are, you know, pretty much no performance jobs in America for some time, potentially years. There are people that are, you know, putting on, you know, operas in parking garages with the people they already know. But for a young artist graduating who has to navigate, you know, online young artist programs now for the same costs, you know, this is a really difficult decision. And the decision they make now is going to have a huge impact. So I would say in the current environment, the value of a music education has gone down quite a bit, but it's not really the school's fault. It's sure the incentives are challenging where you're recruiting students like what you said, but it really is like a global problem that affects music schools and all schools potentially. So, you know, I just want us to keep a broad perspective here, like a kind of a systems level. It's not, you know, UMass Amherst's fault that like no one can leave their house, you know, and that they're at the mercy of whatever the governor says this week, you know, and they're all scrambling to make a new curriculum. So I definitely agree with you both in a lot of ways, but I just hope we can keep a broader perspective on, you know, cost versus benefit.
Absolutely. Here's one more thing. I just love your thoughts on. I do a lot of talks at places, typically not in 2020, but and I get brought in to talk about entrepreneurship for their entrepreneurship class, and I look at the blank eyes of these bassoon master's students, listening to my goofy journey where my car caught fire and exploded, and how that led me to blogging and all this sort of bizarre stuff. And I feel like they're like my least favorite. I mean, if you want to bring me in, that's great, folks, but they're one of my least favorite things to do because I feel like I'm talking to an audience that just doesn't care or doesn't get it. Or they're just like, no, but that's not going to help me get that bassoon job in the Met or that clarinet job in XYZ or what. And so I don't know, what could we be doing to, and I don't know where we could take this in any direction, but what could we be doing to like kindle that fire in people?
It starts in high school. It starts in high school.
Yeah.
Because I deal with this so much. First of all, I learned very quickly, because I lecture all over the place, but I learned very quickly to stop using the word entrepreneurship whenever possible, because nobody knows what it means and they don't understand. And it just alienates people. And so like my most popular lecture is called The Many Paths to a Career in Singing. And they're like, oh, I get that. That makes sense to me. I can do this many ways. I'm going to go to that, you know. But so there's like a whole thing about like, what is entrepreneurship? Does it mean that I start a company? I'm confused, you know. So there's that. But also, you know, as far as the blank eyes and also the the starry eyes, right? It's like they're blank eyes about entrepreneurship because they're starry eyes about the industry. And there's only so much we can do. We can't completely change that, right? Like, and it's good to have dreams and it's good to have aspirations. But, you know, I really think it starts in high school. I taught at the Tanglewood, the BU Tanglewood Institute high school program for 7 summers. So I got to put my stamp of let's have a little bit of pragmatism onto approximately 7 times 7, approximately 490 students, you know, during my time there, at least in a small way, to say, like, you know, go into this and pursue your dreams with your eyes open and and being informed and being at least baseline educated. And in many cases, they don't have the resources. I do think as the world changes and as the old guard steps down and the new guard steps up, you know, the business of the industry will be instilled in people from a younger age out of necessity. But maybe that's a lofty idea. It seems like there's no other. We have to instill these things young.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dana. Entrepreneurship, everyone just rolls their eyes and it's gross. And there are a ton of singers out there who are just like, I don't want to build like a social brand about, like, you know, a TV show, or I don't want to do any of that. All I want to do is sing. And like, I could not understand that perspective more. Unfortunately, that's not where we're at right now. And we have to accept the reality in front of us that our world is now online for a while. And if you're not there, you're not seen by whomever is also online, which is conductors, artistic directors, managing directors. You know, the number of things that have come up from just talking about things in our business online for the last couple months. If I had just, you know, and there's nothing wrong with the strategy of just putting up the covers for a couple weeks and turning out the lights and listening to folklore or something. I mean, that's a totally valid strategy to deal with what we're going through. But if you decide to be a musician, you are not by choice self-employed, which means you are an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not. So, you know, you can sort of wait around and you can find a system. Like, you know, in instruments, there's the kind of tenor track-ish orchestra. There's academia. There's sort of like systems of comfy constraints that give you times and deadlines. But, you know, as we've learned in the last 6 months, that's largely an illusion in terms of a safety blanket. So we kind of have to make our own opportunity whether we want to or not. And while I'm deeply sympathetic to the people who are just like, I just want to sing La Boheme, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about my global brand. That's fine, but you might want to like learn a little bit about it so you can kind of like figure out what's going on.
Well, and there's that so frequent amongst classical musicians in particular.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Perfection. Yeah, here we go. And so, like, I'm sure you've given us similar talks, Dana. But like the one thing that I try to leave people with is go out and do something on a regular basis in public. Start a blog, start a YouTube channel, start posting regularly on Instagram, whatever. Get used to putting yourself out there in public and doing it on a regular basis because you'll build skills. Even if nobody looks at your stuff, you're going to get better at communicating coherently, public speaking, like what I'm doing here. Like, I'm still not very good at this podcast thing, but I'm a lot better than I was 750 episodes ago, you know?
Great.
Well, it's still a work in progress, in my opinion, but it's just one of those, you just build that muscle, get used to doing that. And it's nothing but positive. The worst thing that happens is nobody will care. No one's going to care anyway, because they don't know who you are. There are so many other things to look at, but you'll build that skill. And if you can combine anything with the ability to communicate clearly, you got something there. That's my sort of general
But some
pep
people
talk.
don't, some people really don't want to do that stuff.
Right. Yes.
And then they also need to know that about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's something that's become abundantly clear, especially this summer. I mean, I used to do like 5 career coachings a month, and now I'm doing like 10 a week. It's just been crazy. Some people just really, that's not who they are. And then they need to know that they need to change their plan.
Yeah, I'm. If you don't mind, I'm going to be quoting you on that, Dana, and sending people to your site just to because I think that's such an important thing to think about. I've had similar conversations. Oh, you got to get out there and be extroverted. No, I don't want to do that. Great, you can.
I don't want to do that.
I do want to do that.
And it doesn't mean that you can't still have a career in music or a partial career in music along with your correlating career, but you will absolutely need a correlating career and a lucrative one at that, because, at this point, entrepreneurship is not an option. It is a requirement. So.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of both of you too. I can't wait to follow along. I will link up to thank you. I'll link up to everything we talked about in both your sites. Anywhere else you want me to send people, just let me know.
I just put out a second album with a big plop into the pandemic. It's called Dark is Yonder Town. It's with guitarist Dieter Henningsjumens, and I'm really happy with it. And
it's really great, Zach. It's really great. I love it. Yeah.
All right.
It was my 2019 flip sparkle, pieces of flair that I had, and I released it into the wilds, and sort of nothing happened. So
I will definitely send them there for sure.
Yeah, for me, I recently rebranded and built a brand new site. I spent the entire summer with a branding expert and a web designer and recreated the empoweredmusician.com. And it's quite user-friendly. So when you go on, you can either decide that you want to take voice and piano lessons, and that's the studio portion of it. And then there's a tab for career coachings. You can book right on that tab. And then there's a tab for speaking engagements. If you want me to come speak, there's a booking form at the bottom that you can easily submit. So it's pretty straightforward. I do career coachings for all musicians. I do mostly get singers, but I would love to see more musicians, more instrumentalists in my office, quote unquote. And so, all encompassing all musicians is my ideal is my long-term plan. So theempoweredmusician.com. And then my website is danavarga.com. And I also am the co-artistic director of MassOpera, which is a small but mighty opera company here in Boston that is doing big things. So massopera.org.
Okay.
You just got a big pickup, I think, in the Boston Globe about your recent show, right?
Yeah, we were just in the Boston Globe for our initiative called Social Distancing. Get it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sing. Right. Where my co-artistic director, Dan Ryan, who's amazing and he's new to MassOpera, he took a pickup truck, threw some singers in the back of it, and drove them all around Boston, and they performed, and everybody whipped out their cell phone, and people were weeping, and it was just awesome.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
It was awesome.
Oh, that's so great. What a creative way to get out there with some music. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the singers had to sing the program multiple times, but they had a great time. I mean, it was very special for everyone. So, yeah, It's pretty cool.
Zach, Dana, thank you so much for talking with me. And folks, definitely check out their sites, check out the article. It's an interesting, challenging topic and something that I just feel like it's important for me to get that message out there, not trying to be egotistical or something, but just the fact that I don't have a horse in this race. I am not a music student. I'm not the parent of someone going to music school. I'm certainly not involved in any sort of institution of higher learning right now. So I think it's not that you should do what you want to do. And I think that came across in this conversation. But more knowledge is power, and thinking about this with people that have thought a little more deeply about it, like Zach and Dana, I think that it's an important message to get out there. I'm trying to not edit these outros, so if I'm stammering a bit, it's Friday morning, and I just woke up, and I'm trying to get caffeinated and drinking some water and all that sort of good stuff, and it's 85 degrees here in San Francisco right now. It's going to get into the 90s, which is an unpleasant thing here where nobody has air conditioning, so apologies if I stumble through this outro. But I really had a great time connecting with Zach and Dana, and when Dana messaged me back when I reached out to her and said, hey, by the way, Arnold Schnitzer's my dad, I was like, what a small world we all live in here. So the Middleclass Artist, wow, go through that site and just you'll be amazed at what's on there. Or at least I was amazed. And Dana's site, The Empowered Musician, beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I love exploring. Yes, the name of this podcast is Contrabass Conversations, and maybe I should have titled it something different because I know a lot of non-bassists listen to this, and that's beautiful. And I stick behind that name because I do generally talk to bassists, and I am a bassist, and but bassists talk to other people. So, this is getting a little rambling. So I will depart this outro and just wish you the best. I hope that your October is going well. Here in San Francisco, where the seasons never change and it actually gets hotter as the year goes, it's a confusing feeling time, and of course during the pandemic and all that sort of stuff. But this podcast, I feel like it's something that keeps me sane and keeps me stable. And by the way, I'm actually kind of doing a thematic week this week. We're going to put out something else for the next episode, also kind of relating, not kind of, actually directly relating to higher education and just thoughts about going back to music school. So I will thank the team. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. And Mitch makes beautiful basses. It does great bass work in general in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Kilgore, Texas, just east of Dallas-Fort Worth. Look him up at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.